What is happening, everybody, and welcome back to the Skyline View Podcast. I'm Stephen Rissotto, the editor-in-chief of the Skyline View. You could check us out on our website, theskylineview.com, and our social media pages, the Skyline View. Today's episode, we are joined by a very special guest. He is the host of Robby's World Podcast. He's involved everywhere in Pacifica. He is a part owner at Breakers, Breakfast, Brunch, and Lunch. He's in a band. He does so many things. Robby Bancroft is here. Robby, what's going on? How you doing?
Dude, you're like such a professional. I'm not going to lie. I watched a couple episodes last night. Of course, I subscribed like everyone else should. But you got that down. You're going to go like from behind the scenes at the Giants to like announcing. I feel like, is that where you're headed? Because that was like really good. That was a really good intro. So.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. That would be awesome. But it's funny that you saw the intro and you noticed, wow, he's good at the intro, not all the accomplishments that I listed for you. So.
Oh, yeah, because I don't know how to practice self-love. So we could just get straight into that.
Yeah, exactly. So you guys could follow Robby on Twitter at The Real Rob with two B's. Actually, it's The Real ROBBYB, and same handle on Twitter. And you can like his Facebook page as well, Robby Bancroft. He is everywhere in Pacifica, and he is a Skyline alumni.
Yes.
So the first place I want to start, Robby, is you had a recent a show that aired that you were a part of on KQED in the Bay Area. You want to kind of describe what you did there and how the
I'm famous was? Now. And this is my first stop on the media or what is it, the press run. So Check Please shut down during COVID. They kind of shifted gears and relaunched and had a spin-off called Check Please, You Gotta Try This. And so they put out kind of like a casting call, and it was during a time where I was actually doing a lot of interviews about Pacifica and rebuilding the restaurant out of the pandemic. And so I was kind of like in that mode of kind of having, pictures and videos and numbers and stories ready to share. And so kind of this thing fell, on my timeline. I was like, oh, that could be something cool to try to get more eyes on like my family, our story, but also Pacifica, because I'm always looking at ways to promote Pacifica because that's obviously my hometown and I care about it deeply. So I applied. I think I put it in my calendar to like apply, and then it like came up and it was like the last day. So I just kind of wrote the first things that came to my mind, shot it off, and I felt pretty good about it. And then about 2 weeks later, I get a text message with like, hey, do you want to be on the show? Like, answer your phone, because I never answer my cell phone. It's either on silent or there's just like unknown numbers. And so I was like, oh shit, like or OS. and I went down to my phone. I was like, yeah, totally. Like, I didn't realize you were trying to get a hold of me. And then you do an interview on the phone, and I felt like that went pretty well. And they were very thorough. I will say that they do not mess around. They want to make sure that you don't know the restaurant that you're suggesting. They want to make sure there's no like hidden like ties or any like, behind the scenes deals. And then they also want to make sure that the restaurant is reputable and that when they are on TV, that they can handle the business and also deliver the product that we're saying that they are. So I'm really impressed with the whole staff and the production crew and the whole process. So Cecilia, if you're watching, thank you for making my dreams come true. But that's a short story.
So what was that experience like? Because I know that you got to taste. I haven't seen it yet, but I know that you did.
Oh, like how's it work?
Yeah, how does it work? What for those that didn't see the episode? What can they expect?
So the spinoff, it's 3 guests, like just regular old Bay Area folk, and they each suggest one of their favorite dishes. That's the you got to try this part of it at their one of their favorite restaurants. So one woman, she suggested the Brussels sprout tacos at a place called Paper Plane in San Jose. Another woman suggested the ravioli. I want to say ravioli at Ravioli House in San Mateo, and then I suggested the burger at Pacifica Brewery. And then we each had to all go to each other's restaurants and try each dish. So I went to all 3, they went to all 3, and then when we record, we all talk about the dishes, and then they edit it together. It was over Zoom, and then they cut it together and put it, part of their new season. What else I like about it is they go to the other restaurants and they shoot like real good footage and they interview the owners. But the owners don't know who nominated them. So like I couldn't really talk about it until it aired. So unfortunately I couldn't like come on podcast before. I'm like, oh, it airs, but so you're going to see this a little bit late, but there's still time to check it out. It's on YouTube. It's on their website. It'll be on my stuff too.
Awesome. What was that feedback like? Because I know you have a lot of friends and family that checked it out. And so what was some of the messages that you were getting when people said, oh my God, that's Robby on TV?
Oh, yeah, it was actually pretty surprising. I didn't realize how, like, I knew the show was popular, like, of course, in the Bay Area, but not to the point where, like, my, like, distant aunts or uncles or people actually, I went to Skyline with a few people who haven't talked to forever, like, sent me messages on Instagram, like, I just saw you. So, yeah, it's cool to get, like, a little taste of that. It was like 99%, I'd say 100% positive feedback because people are just so excited, either for me or for the restaurant or for Pacifica or for everyone. But I'm pretty active on Facebook and like a lot of the Pacifica groups. So as soon as I was able to talk about it, I shared it, and it was so cool to see people like, oh, that's my favorite show, or like, oh, I can't wait to watch this, or oh, you did great, or oh, I got to try that. And when they said you got to try that, I was like, that's so cool that the show actually works. Like, it's bringing business into Pacifica and it's bringing business into the restaurants, and that's what their goal is. And if you remember earlier, I was saying that was my goal too, is like just support overall. So it was very gratifying, I would say.
Yeah, and let's kind of shift here to your younger self. What was it kind of like growing up in Pacifica? How was your childhood? Did everything go smoothly?
No, I just told you I can't practice self-love. No, pretty good. Yeah, I went to, you would probably know it as Ocean Shore, but it was Pacific Manor. And then I went to Sharp Park. You would probably know it as Ingrid B. Lacey. And then I went to middle school at Pacific Heights, which is actually the Skyline Cosmetology building, and then Terra Nova, and I played football freshman year. I tried out to play baseball, and I got cut. I was the last person to get cut. They took a catcher, and I was a pitcher, and so I thought that was a sign that I was going to hang up my mitt, and then I'm going to focus more on my college prep classes and stuff like that, because you probably can attest to this. It's really hard to be like like the jock, or also like the person in the AP classes and the leadership and this, and I like to just do it all. I was just used to doing it all. And as I was getting like older and having to focus more in high school, unfortunately I had to like stop playing sports. But I still was active, just not on like a team. And then I went to Skyline because I got into some four-year colleges, and I guess it's more common knowledge now where it's like, oh, you don't need a degree. But even towards the tail end of like my generation, they were still telling us like the only way to get a good job is through college. The only way to have like any sort of stability. But they never talked about like happiness and, like harmony of like work. I don't like work-life balance, but just like harmony. I feel like there's more of that now because the internet, and we didn't have smartphones and stuff in high school. Like, so all these things, that's why I was asking you how some of these things come naturally to you. Maybe you were kind of like born into it. So I went to Skyline and I started working at Chili's in San Bruno, and that actually started my like restaurant career too, because my dad started at Chili's not too long before me. But yeah, for the most part, just a very average upbringing in Pacifica, but there was definitely its ups and downs and there's trauma, obviously, and that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. So at Skyline, did you know that, you were going to become someone that was very vocal in the community? What was kind of your going to Skyline? What was kind of your experience? Did you have like a career plan at that point?
I actually really appreciated my time at Skyline. I felt like they were always trying, and they still are. I feel like when I started is like just when they started all the remodels and stuff, but every time I'm there's like a new building or a new sign, or a new library or something, or like that bookstore is like really nice now, even though they overcharge you guys like for your books. It's just, there's the Gandhi quote. I don't know if it's still there, but just like kind of like, I always felt like they were trying. Obviously it's a good mix of people. It's very diverse, which is kind of how I grew up too, but a lot of people don't. So I would say I enjoyed that for the most part. It was hard to kind of balance working and then like a social life and school. I was always involved, and I didn't necessarily think that I'd become someone who was so outspoken or involved in the community, but I was always like in like a band or playing music or putting on shows. So I used to do like interviews. I would always work with the Skyline newspaper to kind of promote stuff like that. But I feel like that was like my first like real interview, as I did a interview with one of my friends at the time, maybe would have been the editor, about like a Boys and Girls Club show or something like that. But I was always in fundraising and getting the word out. I feel like naturally, or maybe because my dad and my mom were both in business and sales, it was like natural ways to get the word out about stuff. And so now I'm just putting that into practice, and it doesn't come as hard. I don't have to like reach in my bag as deep. But no, there's no way to. I would have known any of this being in Skyline. No.
Yeah, and you seem like a very enthusiastic guy. You are a very enthusiastic guy. Where does that come from? Where do you learn that? Were you born with it? What do you, if you had a theory to kind of where you got your enthusiasm, where do you think it would originate?
I'm still trying to figure it out. I think naturally I get excited, and when I get like a good feeling with someone like you, like you're just really impressing me right now. Like just the questions you're asking and the way you're doing it, like I'm just really proud of you. I don't know how to explain it, but that gets me excited, because then it's like we see each other, and then I want to share more. I feel like I want to help people. So right now I'm picturing like listeners being like, oh, I wish you could say this, or I wonder this, because I didn't necessarily have that when I was younger. There's kind of that quote, like, be the person you needed when you were younger. And so we didn't have this as so easily attainable. So there's that. There's just the pure excitement about just connecting, I believe. I am going through like a bit of like a mental health thing. I'm struggling with sleep apnea. I don't know if you know what sleep apnea is, but that can give you bursts of energy, but also kind of take you down. So that's why I just got to kind of really like watch myself. But I have this natural excitement, and I just want to be everyone's best friend. And that might just be like maybe a little bit from my dad, maybe a little bit about my brain chemistry, or just the fact that I'm like excited and grateful for these opportunities, because I know they're just going to grow and do good for all of us.
Yeah, that's definitely a positive way to look at it for sure. I want to go back to Chili's. I want to go back.
Yeah, we get some big back ribs.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously going into, I guess hospitality would be the right way to put it. Going to restaurant and hospitality and just working with people in general just seems like a big jump from maybe not doing that. And I know you've probably been around people your whole life, but what was it like kind of getting your feet wet in Chili's, and how did that set you up for
Chili's to me was like Skyline was like going to school, like kind of an extension of high school, like they say. But since you didn't leave home and you're not in a dorm, or you like, I don't even think there's frats. Like there's not like, we're not like, across the country. I've been to just places look like huge like movie sets, and that's like college. So you weren't going to get that from Bay Area. Even in San Francisco State is a commuter school. So a lot of my friends who went to San Francisco State, like they just drove from their Pacifica house, you know what I mean? So to me, Chili's was that college experience. My dad wasn't so strict growing up, so it wasn't like, oh, you better get out of the house to like, spread your wings. But it was like, meeting people, getting into good and bad in different situations, kind of being on your own, being able to kind of spread your wings, but always know, you can come back home. But there was like besides just interacting with so many different humans in that arena, all of the staff are on all different walks of life. And so like my first day actually that I was a host was my dad's last day, and he had to be, I don't even know, obviously old enough to have me. So like there was the older folks, and then there was the younger folks just coming in, and that's kind of what like the industry is. But the industry, like, even though sometimes it gets a bad rap, there are beautiful things about it. And the beautiful things about it is you can connect with people, you can make good money, and then you can get those like life experiences. And once you have those skills, you can go anywhere you want. So if you work at a restaurant or something in the food and beverage, you will always be able to work. And having that kind of power, they play that down, because a lot of people say, oh, get a real job after college, get a real job. And a lot of people I were working with like had degrees. They were going to be like dental assistants and stuff, but they were making $300-400 a night behind the bar. And so me and my friend were just like, why would we do what like people want us to do when we're having a good time and we're happy? And so that's what I mean when people don't talk about that enough. But yeah, Chili's taught me a lot that I still use today. I can give you one good example of like a Chili's life lesson. If you have time.
I really want to hear it.
Okay, so in the Chili's, well, first of all, you're a pepper pal. So like you're a pepper pal for life, because that literal pepper. But they had this saying when a table would get upset over anything, whether you forgot the extra lemons or they wanted their steak medium rare. Like, I don't know if you've seen that movie Waiting, like back in the day. So they would call it LAST. So LAST is the acronym for listen, apologize, solve, and thank. And we still use that in the restaurant industry. I try to use that in my relationship. It's a little harder because I'm a little more emotional. But even if you think about it, like even if your teachers or someone gets upset, you just like listen, you apologize, and you solve and you think like genuinely, like what can that guest or what can that person, how can they be upset or what can they do? Give them their time, obviously, to do what they want to do. But yeah, I'll never forget Last from Chili's.
A lot of passion in the
Have you heard that before?
I have not heard that before.
Okay.
I have not heard that before, but
Cool.
It does sound like there's a lot of passion
From me or just the industry or in general?
from the
people?
industry. From the
Yeah,
industry.
I mean, it's you can survive there. Like I just watched a podcast with my friend Paul. He has a TikTok that's like blowing up right now about food, and he spent half of the episode talking about how the industry can literally help you survive no matter what. And it's like, it doesn't dawn on you, but that's what a lot of us were doing is surviving. So yeah, the industry, you're very passionate, you make good money and you meet good people. It's the one or two Karens, that kind of like ruin it. And you still have dreams that you forgot the ranch on table 23. I still have Chili's nightmares, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah, 100%. Do you think that, the restaurant, because I know we just talked about passion, do you think the restaurant industry has, maybe the food is a secondary and hospitality is number one, or where would you kind of rank those in terms of the restaurant industry?
That's another great question, Stephen. I'd say overall it's the experience and the food is part of it. I joke around that like getting the food out to the table is like the easy part. But it's the vibe that you set. It's the welcoming staff and the knowledgeable staff that you put in place, and then it's the kind of this when you're hosting a party, even at your house, you want to make sure everything's as perfect as possible. And so food is just an element of that. But people can cook at home. People can get to go. They can do so many things. If it was just about the food, then they can handle it on their own. So I like my dad, and I even think this is probably a Chili's or a Stax or something, but you want to like wow your guests. So you want to have a good impression coming in and a good impression coming out. And food handles some of that, but it's definitely the experience. We're big on experience. When we first opened, my dad said, we have to have the food because people will come back for food and bad service. They won't come back for bad food and bad service. So you want to make sure the food's locked in. But as soon as the food's locked in, you want to make sure all the servers are locked in. And then past that, you can't beat the view that we have. You can't beat the location. So once those things start clicking in, but of course, 100% you have to have a good product. But that product is part of the experience. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
Are you a perfectionist at all?
No, I actually hate the term perfectionism. And do you follow Gary Vaynerchuk at all?
I don't.
Do you have any idea who that is?
I have no idea who that is.
That's crazy that you're doing what you're doing right now and you have no idea who he is, because he's the one that inspired me to do this. That's why I was asking if this just came naturally from you. So you definitely have like the it factor. So don't ever doubt yourself, and I'll send you some more stuff. But perfectionism doesn't exist. A lot of people say, or actually Gary Vee says that like perfectionism is kind of just like makeup for your insecurity. Because you're trying to get so perfect, it's because you don't want people to judge you, or you don't want to feel like you're wrong. And so anyone that I've worked with or that I've known who are perfectionists, it's more of like a protector than it is like a thing you want to work with. It that's perfectionism, and then also like control freaks. If anyone tells you they're both of those, like try to work with them, and if not, don't take it personal if you have to bounce. But do you believe in perfectionism, or have you heard that anything I've said like that before?
No, I think that people definitely try to be perfectionism, but I don't think, or try to be perfectionist, but I don't think perfection exists.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So how can, so what is it really? It's insecurity, unfortunately. Yeah. It's like, no, I'm a perfectionist. It's like, no, your mom and dad used to make you feel bad for getting something wrong when you were younger. So
yeah. Well,
is there therapy is there like psychology at Skyline?
There is.
Okay, I need to come talk to them. Like, trauma's real, man. And we don't realize it, but we're being programmed. So the person who says they're perfectionist was programmed unfortunately by their mother or father or their caretakers. Yeah. So I just feel bad. I feel empathy for those folks.
How can anybody be a perfectionist when nothing's perfect?
That's what I'm saying.
Big brains.
I love it. Is that the big quote?
Yeah.
And it's going to be us like.
Yeah, exactly. So you're located right now, you're sitting down in a booth at Breakers.
Yes.
Breakfast, brunch, and lunch.
I like how you say the whole title because no one else gets that right.
Yeah.
They all go, oh, the Breakers. It's like, no, there's no the. It's like Facebook.
and it's, you guys invested in it. You and your dad went in, invested in it, and you guys are co-owners of the restaurant. And it's jumped. It's become very popular. It's one of the top. I believe it was number one on Yelp, right?
I think Yelp and depending on the category,
Mhm.
but yeah, like TripAdvisor, it's if you search breakfast in Pacifica, you're gonna get us. So I think that's like the thing that has us ranking the most. One, because I strategically put it in the title, but also because a lot of the breakfast places that we grew up with, or maybe I grew up with, closed, and we do good here. So those that kind of works out. But yeah, we got an investor early on, and then we actually were just able to kind of purchase the shares and work that out behind the scenes. So now it's finally me and my dad in it, and it is a dream come true, but it's hard work, and there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes besides just getting the food out.
Mm-hmm. What is up? Has it been exactly what you expected? Is there like kind of a process that where you had to learn on the fly? What was kind of the process like in getting situated?
Oh man, this is like one of my favorite interviews because you're like making me like go different places. So I appreciate it.
I like to bounce around,
That's awesome. There's no way to expect what we're going through now, especially trying to like thrive. First we survived, now we're trying to thrive out of the pandemic. So aside from like predicting a pandemic, we're heading into about our 8th year, I believe. So from year 1, I don't think we expected it to kind of jump off the way it did, but we just knew because for 10 to 15 years, even as I was a little kid, we were always talking about like when my dad gets his restaurant. But there's no way some of the things that we've experienced, even in my dad's 20 years of restaurant experience before, he hadn't even experienced because he used to work at 2 places very similar to this. So if he saw some things that he'd never expected, it's impossible for me to expect it. I think the closest thing I could say is I could expect people coming in and enjoying themselves and eating and paying, even though that was weird when someone handed me money for food, like the normal stuff. But as far as like the personalities of our staff and the bonds that we've all kind of formed, or different issues or different hiccups or different fires we've had to put out, like literally, you can't expect anything. The best thing is like expect the unexpected and then just like trust your knowledge, your skills, and your gut and each other, and then communicate as best you can.
So almost 8 years. I mean, what has changed from the first day to maybe now? Is there anything that has changed the most?
It's interesting too. The first day, actually, I didn't even know we were going to open. So that's one change. Is I know when we're going to open. We're 7 to 3. My dad called me. I think I was home from work. I was working at Google at that time. He's like, I'm just doing it. Like we have to, because we were like, actually we're getting like evicted at that point. We had like a PG&E or like a 3-day notice on I think the power was off. There was like a notice. And so like just the money left in his pockets and everyone else's pockets, they just opened. And so I rushed down here. So that's, I'll always remember that first day. And yeah, people came in and we did okay business. And then the weekend hit and people were coming in like we were here for years, because it's just like travelers or whatever. So that's interesting. And then we'll say like for today, for example, like I said, we're still kind of in this like pseudo COVID mode. So we're quick service now rather than full service. And that's a big step away from our stuff. We're working on getting a couple more like systems set up. We have like outdoor seating that's supposed to be temporary that we can never do because it's in the middle of the street. I'm standing at it right now. But that might be permanent. So they're just these little, it's kind of like riding the wave. That's why it's called breakers. So it's same in the fact that it's us, it's breakers. It feels like home, but it's different because, the furniture is a little different. And there's a little more stuff happening, but we got a great team, and we had a great team then, but it evolves. So
every day, you go into work at Breakers. What is kind of your go-to routine? What are you doing during work hours?
So it's interesting because my role at Breakers is a lot different than people would expect. As soon as you tell someone you own a restaurant, they either assume you and your dad. Well, no, they assume your dad owns it, which is fine, and then they assume one of you guys, if not both, are the cooks, because it's a restaurant, right? And it's like, no, it's like the opposite. So
or you're supposed to be in suit and ties.
Oh yeah, if we're just like these weird, like what are they, the maitre d's or whatever at the front? Like, yeah, no, that's definitely not Breakers. Maybe our next concept. But yeah, so my dad is a general manager through and through. He's run breakfast and lunch restaurants this size for like most of his life. So he trained me because we both served, obviously. I was never a manager, but I was a bartender, and then he was a general manager, and now he's the owner. And so he trained me to kind of be the general manager, like if he ever needs to step away, or if, like, knock on wood, something happens. So that way, Breaker, you always want the restaurant to survive or go on. It just shouldn't depend on the owner being there. You'll see that a lot in Pacifica. Like if the owner's not there, its stuff isn't the same. That's like bad for business. So my dad never wanted it to depend on him or me solely being there, but more so him, because he's kind of ingrained in the fabric of this. So my role currently, I went from when we first opened, dishwasher to busser to server to manager. I do more of the back end stuff, and so I could like laundry list of stuff, but it's in 5 words left. It's like communications, marketing, business development, like admin, and then like assistant for my dad. If he needs anything done for him so that he can focus on Breakers, I can do it for him there. So I'm more of like man in the chair, and he's like Spider-Man. Like there's like always the hero. So yeah, I'm on the laptop taking calls, meetings, doing stuff like this, trying to get the word out like creatively. I field any like inquiries that come in for sponsorships and stuff like that, because I used to work at the Pacific Resource Center. So I'll team up with people doing fundraising. Like if anyone watching this needs help with fundraising, like come talk to me. We can set you up at the booth and get something going. So I think those are like the 4 or 5 hats that I wear behind the scene. And then if my dad needs me, he knows he can tag me in anytime.
So I'm going to segue because that was perfect. Sure. Wearing many hats. That goes to my next point here. You worked at the Pacifica Resource Center for a good amount of time. Kind of what was your role and what got you into the Pacifica Resource Center? It's not exactly politics, but I mean, the Resource Center is still a big deal in Pacifica.
It is the only social services like core agency in Pacifica. So if they weren't here, all of our unhoused folks, all the families who are below the poverty line, which is half of Pacifica, wouldn't have the resources and information that they need. So it's a very big deal, and it's literally like the thing that keeps Pacifica going. It's just not the most glamorous, thing, because some people want to ignore the fact that there's poor people in Pacifica, and other people kind of use poor people as like a political thing. But the great thing about PRC is it stays neutral, and it just helps whoever comes through the door. They actually just had a fire too, so I'm probably going to get involved with their somehow. We're just kind of making sure they get everything going. But I left about a year ago, but I'm still really close with the staff, and I support them when I can. And I actually joined the board of Pacificans Care, who fundraises for the Pacifica Resource Center and a couple other agencies. So I still get my fix, and I'm still able to help. I'm just not physically there. I'm not worried about the paycheck from there. I never was. But yeah, I got involved there because they came and asked for a sponsorship, and I got kind of rubbed the wrong way. And I was like, oh, like, do you need help with that? Or we can help. And then a few of my friends' parents were on the board, and they came back and they're like, oh, we need like young millennials. And it was like the M word. I didn't like when people called me a millennial, but I guess it's more common now. So yeah, I joined the board, and I helped with fundraising. I helped with events, and then a job opened up, and they're just like, the writing was on the wall at that point.
Okay, millennial. No, I'm just kidding.
What are you, by the way? You're Gen Z? Are you before Gen Z?
I'll be honest, I have no idea, Robbie. It just
right, I'll figure it out.
I'll figure it out. I'll have to look it up, because those kind of things, there's different time zones, and there's like 3 or 4 different time zones that work. So I've seen like millennials going from like the 80s to like early 2000s. But then some of them stop at like 1994. Like, why 1994? Can't it just go to 1995? Like, what's the big deal?
I don't know. Do you remember 9/11? Were you alive, or do you remember?
I was. My mom was pregnant with me.
Okay, then you're definitely not a millennial. There you go.
Yeah, that's the exactly. Test. That's the test. Okay, I accept that for sure.
Cool. Now you don't. That's the way. Like you ever need to ask someone.
Yeah, I don't remember. And we actually just had an editorial, or not an editorial, but an opinion piece by a student that was also the opinions editor, Zachary Navarro. Shout out.
What's up, Zach?
He wrote an article called "I Will Never Remember," because how on 9/11 everybody.
True.
Yeah, it does sound harsh at first, but it's true. We weren't, so everybody's posting "never forget." Well, we never remembered in the first place. So it's an interesting topic for sure. Let's get into your music, because I know you have a music background too. Back to the many hats that you wear, music is one of them. Tell me a little bit about your band and kind of how you got started musically.
Right on. Yeah, so I'm the lead singer of Obsolete Man, which is a hardcore power violence band. And hardcore violence bands are like really like, aggressive, angry, like fast, like short songs. But the lyrics are usually more positive, and they are, about self-expression, and they're usually calling out like systematic failures and all kinds of stuff like that. So I grew up listening to more like R&B and pop music, but then I was always drawn to like more heavy rock music as far as like performing. So I was in a kind of like alternative rock, like we used to we used to cover like Fall Out Boy and stuff, and then left that band, started like kind of like a more hardcore like metalcore band, and that was like in the 2000s, like the not the emo phases, but like right after that, like the metalcore phases. And then took a long break to kind of do everything we just talked about, being in tech. And I traveled with a marketing company for a while and opening the restaurant. And then I could tell something like creatively wasn't there anymore. So I hit up my old guitar player, who I think also went to Skyline. I was like, let's revive the old band. We'll just be like an internet band now. And he's like, oh, I got this new band I'm working on. Come try out. And so I went to this like parking garage in the Tenderloin, and I probably haven't screamed, because it's all like screaming. I haven't screamed in like 5 or 6 years. And I was practicing a little bit with some of like the iPhone videos he sent me. And then we performed like a little bit, and we totally hit it off. One of the gentlemen, Devin, our bass player, is from Pacifica, and then Scott, our drummer, is his friend, and he's from close by too. And then Gino, who was in my old band, he just moved out of Pacifica, and he was like best friends with Devin. So it kind of like, we all could just kind of like fit right in. We wrote an EP, we recorded it, and the day we were gonna release it, I think, was when the like shutdowns happened. Mm-hmm. So like we had to cancel all of our shows. We had to cancel like a few other like, marketing rollout things we were doing. And then the day we were going to release our first music video, George Floyd got murdered. So it's just like all these very like, I don't know, like defining moments in history keep happening every time we try to do something. Mm-hmm. And so we just recorded our second record, and we're going to release that soon too. So I'm hoping that the world has had enough, mm-hmm. and it's time for music to come back. But I'll send you maybe updates more when we're more public about what's happening, what we're doing. But yeah, obsoletemansf.com.
Mm-hmm. So music's kind of like an outlet for you?
I definitely say that now. I didn't realize it. In one interview I did, I talked about how like it felt like I cut my right arm off by like not being creative anymore, especially with music. And then I was like trying to live without like my right arm. So I will never not be involved in music creativity, creatively somehow. I don't know how long I could be in a band, but that's the reason why I'm trying to eat better, and I'm trying to like work out more, because I'm trying to be that 70-year-old just like on the stage, just like, what's up? it just go crazy. So yeah, if there's something creative in your life, don't sacrifice that. Like cut some other stuff out. Maybe the negative people or some things that you're going, like cut those out. Don't cut out the stuff that brings you joy or keeps you going.
So you perform and say, you wake up the next night and the music that you sing is not so great to your throat. So like, do you ever wake sometimes up with like a sore throat, or like where you can't talk the next day?
When I'm performing, not so much, because our set's probably like 20 minutes, and it's like fast and it's heavy, and it's like involved, but it's more of like performing. And when you scream the right way, it's kind of like whispering almost. Mm-hmm. The only time that recently that I've kind of got a sore throat, or maybe I lost my voice for 2 or 3 days, is when I didn't practice, even though my band told me to. And then we went into the studio and we were doing things over and over and over and over and over again. That's gonna hurt your throat more. So practicing and warming up and drinking a lot of water, like I try to do some of those, but I should be doing all of those, if that makes sense. But yeah, if you do it right, screaming is just like singing, and you shouldn't, if it hurts, like you're doing it wrong.
I'll keep that in mind for whenever I sing, which is probably never, but
I think you can do it. I believe in you.
Maybe karaoke every once in a while. Who knows?
There we go. That'd be a nice fundraiser for your guys' paper.
Exactly. Don't get that in my head.
Do you need to fundraise, or you guys are all, does Skyline have money? They're okay.
Skyline View is always looking for some contributors. So, anyways, last thing here before we wrap up, your podcast. You have a podcast now. I mentioned it at the top of the show called Robby's World.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about that, because how did you get your podcast started? I'm always interested to hear about that.
I probably have been talking about wanting to do a podcast since 2009 or 10. And I was around a few people who were like, oh no one wants to hear us talk. Like all the excuses you hear, like no one wants to hear us talk, or I don't want to say anything stupid. And so in hindsight, we probably should have just took the leap. But again, we're all worried about what other people think. And as you get older, hopefully you don't. So that's something I always wanted to do. Again, I still follow Gary Vee, who he's mainly about like business content and happiness also. And then like not forcing people to do things they don't want to do, but also educating you on like, if you have a story to tell, whether you own a little Etsy shop or you just got sucked into like the next, MLM pyramid scheme. He didn't say that, but I feel like that way. Like if you're trying to communicate in this century, like it's not buying billboard ads, not doing this. It's like telling stories. So it's articles, it's videos, it's podcasts. And so when I had like the time and there was just that little crevice of my to-do list that was just begging for a little extra stuff, we finally launched. It was Halloween of last year. And I think I was just, I wasn't like happy. Something was going on and I had to go for a walk. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm just gonna launch it. Cause I was trying to get it perfect before I launched. And Gary Vee talks about like fixing the plane as you fly. And a lot of people never even get off of the runway. And then they get old and they're in their deathbed and they regret never doing that one thing, like asking that girl out or starting that business and stuff like that. So I interviewed Tiger, who you also interviewed around the same time. And I knew that would be a good story and I knew people would watch. Plus Tiger was on the board at PRC, so we already had that connection. And I want to be able to kind of, I couldn't necessarily join his campaign and help him, but I told him like, if there's something I could do, like let me know and I'll, and vice versa. And so we're like, how about just hopping on the podcast? And then we talked for like 2 hours. I felt so good after, like, I wish I would have started, way before. And so I tried to just consistently do one a week. It kind of went to like one a month. And then as soon as like, if there's other fires in life, like the podcast has to pause. So I think from like November through the holidays and then coming back, I picked back up. And then I got to 23 episodes and there's some other stuff going on. I was like, okay, this was a good proof of concept. Everything worked well. I know I got like a good little crew now. I teamed up with PCT. We use a thing called StreamYard. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that made it super easy because it was the editing of the stuff after. And I was like, I don't want to edit. Like, let's just edit live. And so it was super cool. And that just so happened because of COVID, they had to shift to an all digital or, all virtual platform because they have a little podcast studio, but it wasn't working exactly how they wanted or how I wanted. So yeah, I think because of the pandemic and everyone getting used to Zooms, it made it easier for me to do my podcast with them. So now it's on pause and I want to come back, but I want to come back in kind of a different form. My dream would be like we were talking about, a room where we just sit down, we press play or record, and then we can just talk. And then someone's there in the booth, like, like Joe Rogan or whatever.
Yeah. So if I were to bring out a silver platter, okay, we just went over all of it. Okay.
As like we didn't toast it in the center. Okay, there we go.
You got the restaurant, you got the music, you got the resource center stuff, you got everything else you've done maybe in your tech career. What are you probably most proud of?
It's so weird that you asked me that because I literally just talked to my therapist this morning and I don't know how to do self-love. And he said to start with 3 things that you're proud about and that you do well. So that's very similar what you're asking. Like you're saying, like out of all, like so far in my life, like what would I be the most proud about?
Yeah, correct.
I think just because of like my relationship with my dad and how close we are, him being a single father and kind of raising me and literally putting himself before me to the point where like now we're like so hinged that we have to figure out how to unhinge, if that's the word, or untwine. And just sitting in the restaurant now and just hearing myself talk, like almost like an out of body experience to you about it, and the things that we've done, the things we're doing. And then, I look at Nick's, and Nick's has been here for 5 years. So like, my kid's kid might be running Breakers one day. So I can't not say that like opening up a restaurant with my dad wasn't like the thing I was most proud of. and you just like super helped me with a lot that you don't even don't even realize. But yeah, it can't compare to that, because this keeps our family whole, and this allows us to do the things that we can in the community for anyone that needs it.
Fantastic, Robby. Well, it's been a
I'm
pleasure.
just gonna go cry in the corner.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate it. You guys could go follow Robby on his social media pages. I'll plug them again here on Twitter and Instagram at The Real Rob, ROBBYB. Oh, Robby B. I could have just said Robby
B. You did that
B.
the last time too.
I did that the last time too. So at The Real Robby B.
And we're still trying to figure out who The Real Robby B is, but I have a feeling Steven just helped me.
Yeah, no, it's you. It's you. You're The Real Robby B. And on Facebook too, and his website, you could contact him, robbybancroft.com. Dude, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you coming on the Skyline View podcast.
Thank you so much. Hopefully by the time that people watch this, the Giants have clinched, and then you will have that work to do. So I'm proud of you, man. Thank you so much for having me, and you'll be on my show soon as well.
Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. And for more content, go ahead and follow us on all the platforms where you get your podcast: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast, YouTube. We are there. And of course, you can find our content on the skylineview.com. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching, and see you next time.